Officials just concluded a news conference. Again, the death toll has gone up. It is now 119 people, including 36 children who have died. 160 plus people remain missing, among them 5 campers and 1 counselor from Camp Mystic. And again today, officials defended the emergency response to flooding, describing the toll sorting through the wreckage is taking on the first responders themselves, crediting men and women with the actions that they took in those first few hours and promising answers are coming. I want to bring in CNN's Shimon Prokupecz, who was once again at that Kerr County news conference. Shimon, what more did we learn today at that press conference? The kinds of questions that you and our colleagues have been asking.
Well, the first thing, Dana, I think it's important to note, they did something a little differently today in that they brought forward the sergeant of the Kerrville Police Department, and he spoke about just the horrific and the events of that morning and the heroic efforts of some of the officers to try and save many of the people when the floodwaters were starting to rise. And just the description of some of this is so striking. You're talking about officers that are off duty, that notice the flooding. They're living in these communities. By this point, it's really getting too late, and they're going fast into action to try and save people whose homes are being flooded, and people are on the roofs and are in trees near their homes. And then at one point, officers tying a garden hose around an officer to try and pull someone to safety. That person grabbing the hose, one officer tying the garden hose around them, another officer holding that officer, and them trying to rescue people. And these are all very important stories. And but also what they highlight is how by the time law enforcement, by the time the emergency responders went into action, it was too late. People were already in danger. And that's why there are all these questions about how prepared was this county? How prepared was this city? And what steps did they take to alert people of what was potentially going to happen here, what could happen here, what resources and assets were in place in case it got very bad? And what were they doing in the hours leading up to this? What information were they given? What were they asking? Were they talking to meteorologists? We don't know any of that. In fact, I asked the mayor of this city, whether or not he was on a call with state officials on July 3rd. And I was kind of shocked to hear his answer. Take a listen.
Shimon Prokupecz from CNN. The lieutenant governor said that on July 3rd that the county judges and city mayors were invited on a daily call Thursday to discuss weather forecasts. Were you on that call?
I can't speak for the county judge. That would be hearsay. And I'm not going to contradict the information you have. But I will tell you, personally, I did not receive a telephone call.
You weren't invited to the call?
I did not receive a telephone call.
And you were never given any information about what assets were brought into the area?
So I wasn't invited to the call. I'm not trying to deflect,
No,
but I don't.
Do you know why any idea why that would happen? Or?
Maybe I'm not a local mayor. I can't tell.
No.
All right. Thank you guys.
Sure.
So certainly, Dana, that part, very confusing there. The reason why all this is very important is obviously it's just how prepared the city officials here were, how county officials, how prepared they were. The state clearly was trying to alert the folks here that something, they should be worried about this, and they were already moving assets into this direction. One reporter even asked the mayor if he was aware that these assets were coming here, and he seemed to not be even aware of that. But again, all of this is so important because it speaks to the preparedness and whether or not officials had enough information in anticipation of what happens here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that was sarcasm from the mayor there. Thank you so much, Shimon, for giving us all those new details and, of course, the things that we don't yet know. Appreciate it. I want to now turn to Texas Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who is obviously somebody who represents the state of Texas and specifically the city of Austin. Thank you so much for being here. I know, just like so many people in your great state of Texas, this hits home. Two Austin girls are among the victims, one who attended the same elementary school as your daughters. You attended a vigil on Sunday. How is your community doing?
Well, Dana, the pain is really far-reaching, and it affects most deeply, of course, the families of these two beautiful little girls, but it spreads through their classmates and through the community as a whole. I just view this loss of life in such a mass way as being totally inexcusable, and I believe that there were failures at every level of government, and no one wants to be held accountable for it. It is a time to recognize the heroism, of course, of the first responders who got there, as your report indicated, after the damage had already been done, and to welcome all the volunteer support and the pulling together now of all levels of government. That's important. But if we're to avoid another tragedy like this, we have to have accountability. And I think we have to have accountability at the county, state, and federal level. My focus has been federal, but I'm greatly concerned about the failures at the county and the state level.
Well, let's talk about that. You know, what we are hearing from local officials, state officials, is they insist that they're not trying to deflect, they're trying to defer the answers to those questions. It sounds like that's not satisfactory to you.
Well, I think we have to begin right now looking, for example, at the alerts that happen locally. I've represented in the past a neighboring community of San Marcos, which has also had some terrible floods. They have 14 sirens up. Even the volunteer fire department near Kerr County has a siren up in a different county. Why a county would invite people from all over the state and the country to come there to camp along the river and not have an alert system in place to protect those people is difficult for me to understand. And the admission was pretty clear from the county officials about the decision to not do that. On the other hand, the state of Texas had the opportunity to pass legislation on this previously. It basically usually prefers to distribute federal dollars and never to appropriate state dollars. I hope now belatedly a special session will address this. But for the governor to treat this as if it were a football game, this is not a game. People's lives are at stake, and there's so much more that should have been done.
Congressman, that's precisely what I was going to ask you about, because it was striking to hear the governor kind of try to connect with people in Texas using the football analogy, because obviously everybody in the world knows how much Texans love football. Listen to a little bit of what he was saying.
Every football team makes mistakes. The losing teams are the ones that try to point out who's to blame. The way winners talk is not to point fingers. They talk about solutions.
He said, we got this. We're going to make sure that we go score again, and we're going to win this game.
Well, as I said, this is not a game. People's lives are at stake, and the losers are the ones that don't learn from the mistakes, that don't hold people accountable. In this case, I think there are accountable issues at every level of government. And as I mentioned, I think the impact of the Trump administration has to be considered. I haven't accused them of anything. I've asked for a thorough investigation, and the outrageous responses of the White House press secretary and the Homeland Security Department attacking the press for raising the questions makes me all the more confident that we need to have a thorough investigation and ask what effect did it have to not have the meteorologist in charge of coordination and warnings. That person was not in place that night. Why did they not have all of their hydrologists who are responsible for rainfall and runoff calculations? What contacts did they really have there with the local level when the first flood warning came at 1:14 in the morning, when all of Kerr County was asleep, and the eventual flood emergency announcement was after much of Camp Mystic was already floating down the river. That may have been the best that could be done. They had dedicated employees out there that night, I'm sure, but I want the facts, and the fact that they would not give me that information when I asked about it 6 weeks before this happened gives me cause for concern, and they need to provide an immediate answer to all of these questions. Of course, Dana, this is all against the background of the fact that President Trump has led the effort to deny climate crisis. And we know that every time that the Fahrenheit weather gauge goes up by 1 degree, the ability of the atmosphere to become more absorbent of water goes up about 4%. The climate crisis is real. We feel it in Texas, and we need to plan for it in the future instead of denying it, which is what happens at the state and the federal level under these administrations.
Congressman, if you get any of the answers to the questions that you're raising here, and I know that you also raised in a lengthy letter to the National Weather Service and others, let us know. Thank you for your time. And again, so sorry for the loss in your community and the broader state of Texas.
Thank you very much.